Hello out there. This is Pamela Fagan Hutchins, and you are with us on Wine, Women, and Writing. Whether you found us via live streaming or YouTube or a podcast, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is the show where I talk with other authors about primarily their awesome female characters and how they developed them and how they made them authentic and complex and a lot like you and me. I am going to have a really fun guest on today. Before we get to that, I wanted to remind you, because I have to, that this is a solely owned and copyrighted production of Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I also want to encourage you that if you want to see past shows, there's nearly 100 of them now. And if you want to prep for upcoming shows by seeing the authors and the books we're going to be coming to next, please go out to my website, PamelaFaganHutchins.com. And while you're there, you can also find some of my books as well. It never hurts my feelings if you read me, as well as my awesome guests. So speaking of awesome guests, today I have Annie A.M. Geever, author of Love in an Undead Age, from her fantastic, I'm going to let her say the name of the series, zombie series. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello. And the series is The Undead Age. It's not terribly imaginative since that's in the title, but it's the best I could come up with.
I love it. So you guys, Annie is coming to me in Wyoming, all the way from, where are you today?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we were just comparing notes that it's 58 degrees and I've got these low hanging fog clouds below the house here. And you have
sweltering humidity in the low 80s, and it's really overcast. We have less sunny days than Seattle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And see, that's not a well-known fact.
No, everyone it's not, I don't think it's that much, and it's not like we don't get sun, but per year it's less.
Well, it's still beautiful. I think it's one of the prettiest cities.
Pittsburgh's a wonderful place. So I lived in California for almost 20 years in 2 stints, and came home and to be close to family and whatnot. And I'm really glad I'm here.
I did a few years ago. One summer I did 60 cities in 60 days on a book tour. And so I pretty much got to go around the country and decide where my favorite places were. And I will not go through the whole list now, but Pittsburgh's on it. I really just truly and genuinely love Pittsburgh. So now we're not here, though, to talk about Pittsburgh. I say this I'm right as she's like choking and going to take a sip of coffee.
I'd be fine if I hadn't taken a drink of my tea. But
we're here to talk about her zombie books. And I'm going to make a confession. I don't read zombie books. I do read A.M. Geever. I've been totally shocked. I love her books. And when she first pitched me, I was thinking, no, not zombie books. And then I went out and read your profile on Amazon, and I'd read your email, and you were just freaking hilarious. And I was like, okay, I'm totally reading this book. I want to talk to this woman. So where did your inspiration to write zombies come from?
I've always I grew up in a family where there were lots of interest in like monster movies and ghost stories and things like that. And but as far as zombies go, and something that people who don't read a lot of zombie books don't understand is that zombie books, unless it's written from the point of view of the zombie, they're never about zombies. They're about the survivors, the human survivors, and what they're trying to do to survive. And that's what I find really interesting, like how do people manage it? What kind of choices do they have to make in order to survive? How do those choices affect them for better or for worse? And so it's the people, it's the survival aspect. And that's what I like about post-apocalyptic fiction. It's not the only genre I read, of course. I read a whole lot of stuff, but that's what I like about it. I like the survival element and how people do or don't cope with these drastically changed circumstances.
So you've said something that as a writer and a writer who teaches writing is so important to me. You get asked a lot about, how do you come up with characters? How do you come up with situations? And I say, most writers are just writing about the part of real life that they understand and that interests them. Mm-hmm. And it's at its core, most stories are about people, right? And like you're saying, how they cope, etc. And very rarely do you get that point of view of the zombie. By the way, that's my Boston Terrier, Petey, shut up. It's going to snore this whole time. But it is very much the case with your books that when I dove into them, it was really, really interesting human interest and relationship stuff. In fact, the title is kind of a giveaway that it's going to be about more than zombies. When I first saw your title, all I could think of was love in the time of cholera. Do you ever get that?
I get that all if I look my book up, that always comes up first. I was like, maybe someday mine will come up first, but probably never.
But it's a good connotation because it makes you think, okay, this is about real life human people and their relationships in a bad, dark time, right? It's not about the gore, if you will. There is gore. I'm going to tell you there is some gore, but that's not the focus of the book. The focus of the book is Miranda. So let's talk about Miranda. How did you come up with your kick-ass female character? She really is amazing.
Well, sorry, it just started to rain. I was checking the window. Well, obviously I wanted Miranda to be really kick-ass. I wanted her because, well, first off, my book is set 10 years after the zombie apocalypse. The vast majority of zombie apocalypse books are while it's happening. And I wasn't interested in that at the time I was writing this book because I didn't really feel like I had a lot I could add at that time. There's only so many ways you can survive. There are some pretty basic things that you need in order to survive. And so I decided to set my book 10 years later because that way I could play with how do things play out. So Miranda's living in this place that, she's living in Silicon Valley where, the geek factor kicked in after the dust settled. And, they've maintained a really pretty high standard of living, a pretty modern standard of living. Of course, there are some trade-offs for that because it's a very dystopian kind of place for certain classes of people. So, but for Miranda, I wanted her to be someone who, Miranda is what I like to think I would be if I lived through the zombie apocalypse and had not done 10 years of therapy. Miranda is rampantly dysfunctional, but writing about well-adjusted people is really boring. I always think of like Melanie Wilkes from Gone with the Wind, which is a wonderful book, and Melanie's a wonderful character, but she's always so nice and good at everything. And it's just like, come on, aren't we going to get mad?
Well, you noticed she didn't get the lead part, right? We got the flawed Scarlet because that's what's interesting.
Yeah. So, I wanted Miranda to have, I knew what I wanted her to be. I wanted her to be tough. I wanted her to be dysfunctional. I wanted her to have a very strong sense of right and wrong, which really helped me as the storyline developed because the love story completely changed. It wasn't supposed to be what it ended up being, but that was nice because it gave me a really nice contradiction to work with because Miranda does have a really strong sense of right and wrong, and she has lived through this experience that has taught her that if you don't take something now, you will miss your chance. Tomorrow may never happen. So, so you end up with people making choices that they never would have made in the old world, but their reality has been so altered that and that's the other thing. Lived experience is something I find really interesting because, it's so easy to say, oh, I'll do this or I'll do that until you get presented with the situation. And then all of a sudden it's you and it's your life. And it looks very different.
I thought you did a really nice job of, especially because, folks, there is a free prequel that gives the catalytic event that takes you back to the zombie apocalypse, and you get to see the characters as they were then. So for me, there was a real payoff, honestly, going back and seeing how they were then and how they then progressed through the books, because you get Miranda flawed. She's got some serious mental health issues. She's got serious trust issues. You know, she's very paranoid, understandably. You know, hi, kitty. I just saw this cat tail go through the screen. Oh, I would bring all of my 5 animals in the house in, but if it started, it would never end. But you've got these people who are what they are after they've had 10 years to grow tough. And Miranda was not someone you would think of as tough back in the origin story. There, I came up with it. Back at the origin story, she was kind of a wimp. You know, she was the weak link. It's a miracle the girl didn't get herself et. And then you get to Love in an Undead Age, in the second book, Damage in Undead Age, and her development is amazing. And yet, here comes that geeky writing teacher again. It still made sense. It was still within character for her character to have developed the way it did. And I really appreciated that. I love characterization. You could probably have guessed that from my show. But anyway, so thank you for that. Thank you for not going out of left field and no, as I read.
Well, and you know, it's funny because people say, well, how would you survive? I was like, right now, unless I made it the 1/8 of a mile down to my friend's house, who is basically MacGyver, I'm going to die. You know, I'm middle-aged, out of shape. I'm working on losing like 10 pounds. You know, I have no illusions that, like, you know, unless I make it down the street or get really lucky, you know, I will probably be shambling around wanting to eat people's brains.
So we laugh up where I live. I live on the face of a mountain. Our nearest neighbor is about a half mile away, but we live way out of town. Anyway, we're up on this hill with all off the grid, you know, solar power and stuff. And then we've got some neighbors that have tons of guns and ammo and MREs. And we've got some that garden and some that raise cows. And we're like, just bring it on up the hill to our place and come take care of us, because we've got the gun turrets. We're fine here. We'll be the last community standing. So,
well, yeah, there are definitely some advantages. And Wyoming's beautiful. I went to Wyoming, gosh, in the early 2000s. I was dating a guy at the time who was from outside of Riverton, and his dad was an outfitter. So we did this backcountry horseback trip, which was amazing. And you know, and it was funny because I lived in California, and at the time I was like, yeah, I live on the West Coast, but now I'm going to the West, because California is not the West, you know.
No, it's not. Right. But it would be California. I would not want to be there for a zombie apocalypse at all, which is, of course, where the book's set in Northern California. Wyoming, a great place to be for the zombie apocalypse.
Way better.
But you have it set in Sacramento. Am I remembering?
Silicon Valley in
Silicon Valley. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Well, to me, it's all just
California, and a lot begin with S. Yeah.
Sorry, everybody out there from California. I love to visit. You're just not going to catch me living there, which is good news for you guys. However, quit moving to my state. All my neighbors are from California. Anyway, so it's got its pressures of its own. The high population. It's got the needs of feeding large numbers of people without distribution networks and manufacturing, industrial farming, et cetera. And in fact, Miranda gets involved in that. So tell us about her saving the world.
Well, Miranda becomes a farmer. You know, she, in the book, I have her, you know, interested in agriculture, but it was kind of like from more of an environmental. Well, this isn't in the book, but my backstory for her is it's kind of from an environmental standpoint, and, you know, eating locally, food production. But anyway, she ends up, you know, getting involved in wanting to build these vertical farms, which are like super cool. My husband introduced them to me, and for those who are unfamiliar, they're basically these big vertical greenhouses. And so they don't have a big footprint in terms of space because they're high. And like, you can build them with like solar power and thermodynamic power. And the whole idea is that if you have a more controlled environment, you can have more control over crop success or failure. And you can also do organic farming. And because the whole idea is that their organic farms is that they don't have as much crop loss, you know, as normal organic farming. And then the other thing about them is, like, the idea is if you have them in cities, if you have them in more populated areas, or even just in suburbs, if you have a big disruption in supply lines, you're not going to run out of food in 3 days.
Yeah.
Because most cities will run out of food within like 3 to 5 days. So, you know, when I found those, I was like, wow, these are like super cool, you know, and wouldn't it be neat? And I don't think it ever will happen. You know, and, you know, like California does have a huge amount of agriculture in the Central Valley, but, you know, you got to get the water there. And as far as for my characters, it might as well be on the moon. So,
might as well be on the moon. Exactly. I actually have a friend whose kid is in San Francisco doing vertical farming, and they're doing it.
Way.
Yeah, and they're doing it with the fish. What did they call that again? Where the fish?
Aquaculture.
Aquaculture, and so the fish poop fertilizes, and you know, blah blah blah. Anyway, he's from where we are in the Virgin Islands, and he's out there doing vertical farming. Yeah, and I think you're seeing it right now on a smaller scale, more like for restaurants and experimental, and get a grant and do this and stuff, but in the 10 years post-apocalypse where they don't have access to the farmland anymore and they're locked in a city, it's absolutely survival necessity. So she's like practically has to protect it like a warrior, you know, and it, you know, just every element of her life becomes about a fight, you know.
In some ways, yes, very much so. I mean, there's this very repressive society in San Jose, and then there's another community at Santa Clara University, which is where I used to work. I worked there for most of the time that I was writing the book, and it's a Catholic Jesuit university. And because, you know, my husband and I, who's helped me brainstorm, and I was like, well, there's got to be some counterbalance. There's got to be some good group, and it just made sense, you know, because Jesuits are very, and a lot of Catholic orders are really into social justice and the preferential option for the poor in the Gospels. So it just made sense to me that they would be the people who would be a counterbalance to these really corrupt people who are running San Jose. And they're very near each other. I mean, it's you can get to San Jose from Santa Clara. They butt each other, you know, in 10 minutes. So
which it becomes different when you're dodging zombies and people trying to get into your community. And suddenly that 10 minutes is like the valley of death. So your background is that you're trained in theology, which I also thought added a lot to the books. You know, the whole idea of how does this happen? How does, you know, in a world where there should be some good, how do bad things like this happen to people? How do you get past them? The Jesuits versus, you know, the non-religious in the society was a really cool factor as well for me.
Well, you know, it's so funny because when I wrote the book, I wasn't even thinking about that at all. I was just using the building blocks that I thought made sense in the area at the time. And then, I mean, I don't know why I didn't think about it, but, you know, and then there's, you know, another religious group later on, and they have their own take on things. And, you know, so
crazy, they're crazy, spoiler.
Yeah. And people, but, you know, readers said, oh, well, I love this, like, you know, exploration of religious faith. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. That's great. I wasn't thinking about it really. But that's another thing that kind of fits into the whole idea of what happens to people when presented with different situations is, well, I mean, one of the reason I ended up going to grad school, because I ended up not getting ordained. I went to a Unitarian Universalist seminary, and in terms of like my life and personal development, fabulous, great, so glad I did it. But I decided not to get ordained, and but for as long as I can remember, I have always wondered, are people fundamentally good or fundamentally bad? Because people can do such wonderful things and they can do such terrible things, and sometimes the same person can do both. Right. I've eventually settled on people are people, and they can do a lot of different things. But still, that's still that question. You know, I have days when I'm like, people are fabulous, and I have other days when I hate people.
Yep, you'd fit in Wyoming. And I love that. I love the idea of what faith exists after all hope seems to be lost too. And what part does reemerging faith or holding on to faith play in a world where there's so much fear and there's so much despair, et cetera. So whether you mean to or not, and it sounds like it was a lucky accident for us because it's ingrained in your psyche. It's there. And I know we talked a bit beforehand about my readers, your readers. My readers tend to read stuff that is PG, to low R. I got in a lot of trouble with my mother for a book that had F words in it, and readers. I've been scolded. Oh, Pamela, that language, that kind of thing. And this book definitely falls over into the R-rated.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of F-bombs. There's a lot of swearing after the apocalypse. So, if that's not your speed, you're probably not going to like my book. Now, that said, my dad is from Ireland, and he hasn't read the whole book. He's read bits and pieces. But his two sisters, both of them are nuns. And, they're in their 80s now. And my aunts live in Texas. They're orders there. They're retired. And I sent the book to everybody. And my Aunt Eleanor, she said, I found out she's reading my book. She's like 84 years old or so. She's a nun. And of course, the only thing I could think of was, oh my God, it has sex. and then, and she, we talked about it, and she said, I wasn't planning to read it. But, I just thought I'd look at a couple pages, but it was so good that I kept reading it. So I told her, I said, well, when I first heard you were reading it, I was like both excited and horrified. And I realized that, you're an adult, you understand that it's just, I don't know why, because, they've done so much work in the community with helping disadvantaged and underserved communities that, like, my aunts are probably more
exposed to it
in some ways.
And the thing to me about the inclusion of profanity and sex in a book is if it makes sense for the characters and it has purpose in the book and it's not gratuitous, then to me, it's part of the story that should be there and is expected. I know not everybody feels that way. And I've written a series for you people. It's the Patrick Flint series. But it is, to me, in this book, it is not jarring. It is exactly what I would have expected. People have had to become rougher, more live in the moment. Take what you have now when you can. Tomorrow's not promised. It fit very well for me. Plus, you're freaking hysterical. Some of it was just so funny that it was just like, oh my gosh. But I would say that for those that just can't stand the F-bombs, don't read it. It's not for you. But for those who are kind of on the fence, I want to say something. And that is, I don't take a lot of unsolicited pitches for interviews. I don't take any unsolicited pitches for zombie books. I did for Annie, and that's because the girl can flat out write. These books are really good. I have so many books by we won't name them because they come on my show sometimes. No one that's ever been on my show. No one that's ever planned to be. People that want to come on my show, where I have to read the books to decide whether to come on my show. And I'm like, I know you're famous, but this is stinky. But with Annie, it was like, oh crap, she has to be on the show because this girl can this middle-aged woman has that. I say that, I'm 54, this woman can flat out write. The books are so good. And I just devoured them. Honestly, I just devoured them. And my husband would be like, what are you reading? I'm like, the zombie book. Can you believe it? And anyway, so
That's really, really kind of you to say. So.
Well,
and the other thing my aunt said to me was, well, Annie, you're a very good writer. And I hope that you will write about more than zombies. I hope you write about something. It was so cute because she said it like 4 times. It was the cutest thing. And I was like, I got to write about something other than zombies just for Aunt Eleanor.
There you go. Just one off. See how it goes for you. There's many other ways to end the world,
Oh, yeah. Well, and, you mentioned about, it made sense for the characters. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn as a writer, because I would think, oh, I could have them do this. And I would kill myself writing these scenes. And then it gets there and it's like, this is great, but it's not moving the story forward, So like there was something, I had them go on this adventure to this iconic bookstore in Portland in the second book. And it was like 3 chapters long, and I busted my behind. And then you got to it, and like every single beta reader was like, cut it, cut it, cut it, cut it. And, you know, when I looked at it again, I was like, yeah, they're absolutely right. So, like, you know, for this last book, every time I had this, oh, they could do this, they could do that, I was like, or maybe not. Why don't you outline it first and see if it makes sense?
Right.
You know?
Ask the characters what they want to do next.
Yeah, well, they're so unruly. I thought writers were just talking out their ear. I thought that was something writers just said. It was like, well, I didn't plan this, but the character led me this way. And
but
you know, sometimes they just get this, like, you know, Doug was supposed to die in the first book. He was supposed to die at the end, but you know what? He was so fun to write.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd be an idiot if I got him. So, you know, so yeah, they just take on their own lives, and you're almost just along for the ride sometimes.
The more real you let them become, the more you let them try to tell you what to do instead of enforce your will, the more authentic they become, the less unnatural and awkward they become. When we try to write it, as opposed to, like, when I do first drafts, I kind of just let it come over me. Like, I do it as fast as I can without editing myself or censoring myself, because I'm trying to let it move authentically. But we write those book scenes in Portland when the writer's trying to think too hard. You know, when you're trying to say, what would be really cool? What would I want to do if it was my last chance?
Yeah. And maybe I would love, the book lover in me would love to get to Powell's and like have a whole bookstore to myself, but it just ended up not
working. Yeah, but you know, it's kudos to you that it only took you, you know, your first book to discover that, because some people never figure it out.
I'll probably do it again, and I'll probably have people say it's not moving the story forward. You have to cut it, and I'll have to feel sad for a day, and then cut it.
Why are they so mean to me? Why don't they get me?
I always get so nervous when I have people take a look at it, because you know, you never know what they're gonna say, but you know, and there's things you really like, and you know, I have to remind myself, don't get too attached. But you know, then they also have like these amazing ideas, and they're like, you know, you really missed an opportunity here. And I'm always so grateful when people say that, because I'm so in my, this is where I'm going with the story, that you know, you miss other opportunities. So like, nobody writes a book on their own. You know, like you might do the heavy lifting in terms of telling the story and whatnot, but if a book you would write in a vacuum, I think would not be nearly as good as a book when you've got people who are critiquing and suggesting and, you know, helping remove those blinkers.
That's right. We wear blinders. So what's up next for AM Geever?
Well, I hadn't planned to, but I actually am writing another zombie series. Yeah. Well, you know what? By the time I got done with the first book, I was so sick of zombies. I was like, this is a standalone. I'm never writing about zombies again. But then some time passed, and I decided I could do it. But I am actually going to write another series. It's going to be in the same universe of the Undead Age. However, it's going to be actually set in Pittsburgh, and it's going to be at the very beginning of the zombie apocalypse, because I came up with an idea for it that is interesting to me. Whether it will be interesting to anyone else, I don't know, but it is interesting to me. I'm also planning a kind of a plague series, for lack of a better word. It'll
be series. I'm kidding.
It'll be a series. Well, you know what? I started it as a short story, and in January or like December of 2019. And for this anthology, and then I thought, you know, I actually have a series here, you know. But like, I was writing it like in February, and then March, and COVID's like blowing up, and
you channeled it.
It was a little too weird. It was kind of strange, but that'll end up being YA, which again, I've never wanted to write YA. I find some of the conventions of YA really annoying. But I came up with this character, the 16-year-old boy, and you know, I want to write his story. So you know, there's that, and then I have a couple like straight up sci-fi ideas that I really want to write, and it's just like trying to juggle it all, is very frustrating. I need like 75 hours a day in a like 12-day week, and I'm like be able to like get everything done. So.
Well, it sounds like I need to let you get back to it. You got to write. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show today. This has been a lot of fun to chat with you. The books, again, you guys, are Love in an Undead Age from the Undead Age series, right? Yeah. And go ahead.
Well, and it's a complete series now because the third book just released yesterday on May 25th. So there's Love, Damage, and then Reckoning in an Undead Age. So if you don't like waiting, you don't have to.
Well, now shoot, I'm gonna fall behind on my project now that there's a third one to go read. Is it? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yay, I'm excited. Well, you guys, be sure you go out and start with Love in an Undead Age, and run the table on the trilogy, and then also the, I think it's still free, the prequel.
The prequel actually, I changed that to a newsletter sign up.
Oh, that's cool. That's smart. But you want that.
An opportunity here. So if you sign up for my newsletter at my website, amgeever.com, you will get origin stories as a free ebook novella, basically.
Awesome. Cool. Go do it, you guys. And while you're getting books, Snaggletooth has come out about a month and a half ago. That's number 5 for me in the Patrick Flint series. Be sure you grab that. The next book in the series won't be coming out until the winter, but I've already written it. Wink, wink. That is all I have for you today. So until next time, go out and read Annie's, A.M. Geever's books, and stay safe out there, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.